Welcome, this is Alex, and Yakuza Like a Dragon is pretty freaking awesome. It's my current addiction, here are my thoughts on it. Like a Dragon takes the focus away from the series' more straightforward action-brawling roots and soft reboots it with a great new modern take on the classic turn-based JRPG formula, just with slightly more Japanese crime lords sprinkled throughout, of course. This is an entire game paying homage to almost every RPG trope out there, making it truly feel like a grand celebration for fans of the genre, which is one of the reasons why it's resonating so well with me.
You're gonna get stomped.
Although I was lucky enough to acquire a launch day PlayStation 5, instead of putting the majority of my time into its great launch lineup, I find myself pouring most of my time into Yakuza Like a Dragon instead, which is technically a last-gen title on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. The new protagonist here in Like a Dragon, Ichiban, is the perfect character to go along with this new Yakuza RPG theme, since he is a gamer himself with a wild imagination, transforming almost every real-life situation he finds himself in into a cliché interpretation of some of his favorite games. Dragon Quest, for example, which he references about every chance he gets. I can definitely relate to Ichiban's strange views of the world as someone who has numerous times referenced real-life goals being just like RPG stat progression, and has had the occasional drive through a recently rained-on city street thinking to myself, man, look how good those real-life reflection effects look right now. In my RPGs and JRPGs, I have always valued turn-based combat systems just as much as real-time action. Like pitting poker versus chess, one does not outright replace the other, they just each provide something different. In Yakuza's new turn-based combat system, there are no random encounters, and battles take place in the exact same spot in the environment as where you initiate them. Outside of your commands like attack, defend, items, and skills, things around you in the environment, like certain objects, can be dynamically picked up and thrown or kicked by your character if they happen to come in contact with them during a basic attack, which can deal some bonus damage, and in-world hazards like traffic can also affect the battle, hitting you or your opponents as well. Although there is no time limit to how long you can take during your turn, and the enemies will not act until after you choose a command, that does not mean that timing is not a factor thanks to some very important real-time elements in this turn-based system. During these fights, allies and enemies will be moving around entirely on their own, and many of your skills can hit multiple opponents, which means there's a big importance on firing off your skills at the right time dependent on the constantly shifting battlefield. Also, if you attack an enemy while they're knocked down, you will inflict much more damage, but they will get out of this state fairly quickly, which does put some optional time-sensitive pressure during your turn decisions. Most all of your special attacks will have optional button press inputs during them, which will give you bonus damage if you do them right, adding frequent skill checks to the moment-to-moment combat to make sure you're actively staying engaged. Also, there is a Paper Mario-style defense timing system where if you tap block at the right moment during an oncoming attack animation, you can mitigate some oncoming damage. These battles are one half calculated skill-based tactics, another half unpredictable chaos, perfect for the theme of a Yakuza game. As someone who has dabbled into hundreds of turn-based combat systems throughout the years, I really appreciate the strange and somewhat randomized nature of the combat system here. It's just plain fun. The enemy variety is also great, with 252 Sujimon types, which is the game's gotta collect them all enemy categorying system, which fills up with odd opponents like the twitchy streamer, imp patient, or a personal favorite, pseudo trash, which is just a dude in a garbage bag. With all of these, since the main protagonist is using his imagination to transform how the enemies appear because of his RPG addictions, hard to say which of these are actually real and which are entirely fabricated, making the whole concept of unorthodox opposition even more entertaining. Each member of your party can take on different jobs along the way, which are like character classes, entirely changing what skills they have access to, their outfits while in battle, and how their stats grow. There is a decent amount of good old-fashioned RPG depth to dive into here with upgradable gear and building out the ultimate team synergy, but another standout element outside of all of these underlining systems and mechanics is Like a Dragon's main story. I'm honestly not one to usually care too much about generic video game storytelling because I'm more of a gameplay guy, but Like a Dragon's story has captivated me more than anything else this year. I prefer slightly odd or unorthodox storytelling in my games, TV, or film, and what I mean by that is, to me, Yakuza is like the Quentin Tarantino film equivalent of a video game, where scene to scene, sometimes second to second, the tone can go from hyper-violent and immensely serious, to downright cartoonishly over the top and silly. This constant tonal shift back and forth makes for an overall vibe that I find to really keep me engaged and engrossed, compared to the more traditional, broadest possible audience focused storytelling that hangs out more in that middle ground between those two. For example, your character takes a dive and serves 18 years in prison for his Yakuza family at the start of the game, coming back out into the world homeless and completely broke, as you then have to scavenge any money you can from around the city, be it under vending machines or by collecting cans in a ridiculous minigame, just to be able to survive another cold night with some kind of meal in your stomach. Don't worry, just a few hours later I became a budding entrepreneur owning multiple properties, even getting cocky enough to send my rooster Omelette as a representative to my annual board meetings, putting the fate of my businesses right into the hands of a rooster, trying its best to pacify and silver tongue all of those angry shareholders. I am now fully dedicated to further advancing Omelette to becoming the ultimate leader CEO, with hopeful prospects for future presidency. This back and forth tonal shift between meticulously down-to-earth and realistic, and over-the-top otherworldly ridiculous, makes every main and side quest completely unpredictable. Another dichotomy example, a section of the main story, clan members gruesomely gun down unarmed young recruits in the center of a populated district to start a faction war, but meanwhile in a side quest, I just saved a homeless man's pet crawfish named Nancy, who after being found, became a summonable option on my Poundmate's phone app, which is hireable muscle, not that other thing it sounds like, allowing me to call on Nancy, yes a crawfish, to decimate those same warring Yakuza in full crustacean style. If you have played and loved any of the Persona games, or even the story puzzler Catherine, this is the ultimate game to play next, falling thematically perfectly alongside those titles, and even borrowing some elements from both. I have dabbled in some of the other entries in the Yakuza franchise throughout the years, but their brawler combat really never did it for me in the long run, even though I liked everything else about them. Now with this new RPG focus and battle system, I find that the entire Yakuza package has been fully figured out, bringing the combat up to standards with the rest of the franchise's strengths. All of a sudden, and out of nowhere, Yakuza has become a must-play full-fledged JRPG, which is not what I was expecting to be saying after I casually picked this up the other day on a whim. If you have gotten a chance to play Like a Dragon, let me know your thoughts on it. I'm curious if everyone else is enjoying it as much as I am, and if you've never played a Yakuza game before, don't worry too much about the past games, just jump in here with this new soft franchise reboot. This has an entirely new cast of characters and story to kick this all off into hopefully future sequels. Thanks for hearing me out today on what I had to say about Yakuza, JRPGs, crawfish, and roosters, and for real, I'll be seeing you next time.